Your thoughts are not yours. There is a voice in your mind that has been running since before you had the language to question it. You have built your identity around its verdicts, organized your life around its fears, called the whole arrangement your personality. But the voice and the self are two different things. And by the end of this video, through a 17th-century philosopher locked in a heated room, a 2,500-year-old Buddhist doctrine, and a branch of modern psychology built for trauma survivors, you will understand exactly why that distinction changes everything. There is a question I want to plant before we go any further. It is a question Descartes asked himself in the winter of 1619 and could not stop asking for a decade. It is a question the Buddha asked beneath a tree in Bodh Gaya and answered in a way that fractured every assumption his culture had ever held about the nature of the self. And it is the question that a psychologist named Stephen Hayes began asking his patients in the 1980s when conventional therapy kept failing them in the same specific way. The question is this: who is the one doing the thinking? Not what are you thinking? Who is thinking it? And are you certain, genuinely philosophically certain, that those are the same entity? Hold that question. We will come back to it. But first, you need to understand the mechanism. Because without the mechanism, the question is just a riddle. With it, the question becomes a key.
The brain is not designed to show you what is real. This is not a metaphor or a philosophical position. It is the operating conclusion of contemporary neuroscience, and it dismantles something most people walk around assuming their entire lives. You were taught, implicitly, that your mind is a receiver, that reality comes in through your senses, you process it accurately, and what you experience is a faithful representation of what is actually there. This is false. The brain is a prediction engine. Its primary function is not perception, it is anticipation. Every moment of conscious experience you have ever had, every thought, every feeling, every interpretation of events has been generated by a system whose core evolutionary purpose is to model the future fast enough to keep you alive. It is not looking for truth. It is looking for survival-relevant patterns, and it will sacrifice accuracy for speed every single time. The neuroscientist Anil Seth calls this a controlled hallucination. Your perception of reality, including your perception of your own thoughts as rational, accurate, and uniquely yours, is a construction. The brain takes a small amount of incoming sensory data, compares it against an enormous library of past experience, and generates the most statistically probable interpretation. What you experience as a thought arriving in your mind is not a discovery, it is a prediction, a rendering, an output from a system that was calibrated not by what is true, but by what kept your ancestors breathing long enough to reproduce. And that system has been running inside you, generating predictions about your worth and your future and your limitations since the day you were old enough to have a self-concept. You did not choose those predictions, you inherited them. You absorbed them, and then, because no one showed you otherwise, you became them. Here is where it becomes structural rather than merely uncomfortable. The psychological mechanism at work is not simply that you believe your thoughts, it is that most people are fused with them. The clinical term from acceptance and commitment therapy, developed by Stephen Hayes at the University of Nevada, is cognitive fusion. It describes the state in which a thought and the experience of the thought are indistinguishable from each other, in which there is no gap between the content of the mind and the identity of the person having it. When you are fused with a thought, you do not have the thought, you are the thought. You do not experience, I am having the feeling that I am not capable of this. You experience, I am not capable of this. And those two experiences are not the same. One is an event in awareness, the other is a fact about you. and the entire architecture of your self-limitation is built on that difference being invisible. Think about the last time you didn't pursue something you wanted. Trace it back carefully. Not the story you tell yourself about why, the actual moment of internal decision. There was a thought. The thought had the texture of realism, of clear-eyed self-knowledge, of being simply honest about your limitations. It did not present itself as a prediction generated by a frightened survival organ, drawing on decades-old data. It presented itself as you, knowing yourself. That is cognitive fusion. And Hayes's clinical research showed that it underlies not just anxiety and depression, but the entire range of behaviors by which intelligent people systematically make their lives smaller. Not because the threats are real, but because the fused mind cannot distinguish between a thought about a threat and the threat itself. The relationship you did not pursue, the work you did not submit, the version of your life that exists as a permanent almost, perpetually deferred, gathering weight in the space between what you are doing and what you know you're capable of. That is not the product of your limitations. It is the product of your unexamined thoughts being treated as your limitations. And the damage compounds. Every thought you receive without examining strengthens the next one. Every unquestioned verdict increases the voice's jurisdiction, until the voice is no longer something you hear, it is something you are.
2,500 years ago, in a tradition that had nothing to do with Western neuroscience and had never heard of cognitive fusion, a monk in northern India arrived at a doctrine that the Pali Canon records as one of the 3 marks of existence. The doctrine is called anatta. It is usually translated as non-self, but that translation flattens something that is, in its original formulation, one of the most radical and precise psychological propositions ever articulated. Anatta does not say the self does not exist. It says the self you think you are, the continuous, unified, authorial presence you experience as the one who is thinking, choosing, and suffering, is not a thing. It is a process. More precisely, it is a story that a collection of impermanent mental and physical events tells about itself, moment to moment, in the act of experiencing itself. The Buddha's analysis, which has been partially corroborated by modern cognitive science through the work of researchers like Francisco Varela and Evan Thompson, is that what you call yourself is assembled in real time from 5 aggregates: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, none of which is permanent, none of which has an owner, and none of which constitutes a self in the way you habitually assume. What you call the voice is not you speaking to yourself. It is one of the aggregates, the aggregate of mental formations, sankharas, arising in awareness and being mistakenly claimed as the voice of the self. This is not mysticism. This is a precise phenomenological observation about the structure of experience, and it cuts through the problem of cognitive fusion with a blade that Western psychology spent decades trying to reinvent. If there is no fixed self to be fused with the thought, then fusion itself is a kind of mistake, not a psychological disorder, but a case of mistaken identity so pervasive and so constant that it masquerades as the nature of things. The monks who trained for years in vipassana meditation were not developing spiritual powers. They were developing the ability to observe the arising and passing of mental events without claiming them as self, which is, when you strip away the religious context, exactly what Stephen Hayes independently discovered his trauma patients needed to do in order to stop being controlled by their own minds. The convergence is not coincidental. It is pointing at something real.
Now, we return to Descartes.
The winter of 1619. A heated room in Ulm, Germany. A 23-year-old mathematician and philosopher who had looked at the entire structure of everything he had been taught, every certainty, every received conviction, every belief that had been handed to him by his education and his culture and his own mind, and had seen, with the cold precision of a trained logician, that almost none of it could actually be verified. That the difference between knowledge and assumption was, from the inside, functionally invisible. That he himself, one of the most rigorously educated minds in Europe, had been treating inherited beliefs as self-evident truths his entire life. And he could not prove he had not been doing so with his own thoughts, too. With the thoughts he had always assumed were his. So he did what almost no one does. He decided to doubt everything he could possibly doubt until he found something he could not. Not as an intellectual exercise, as a survival operation for the mind. He doubted the external world. He doubted the reliability of his senses. He doubted mathematics. He doubted the existence of other people. He went as far as positing a hypothetical evil demon, a deceiver of infinite power, whose sole purpose was to make everything he believed false. And in that posture of radical, systematic, total uncertainty, he held his mind open and looked for what remained. What he found, at the very bottom of that philosophical darkness, after every assumption had been stripped away, was this. He could not doubt that doubting was happening. Whatever else might be illusion, whatever else the evil demon might be fabricating, the act of thinking itself could not be denied. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. But here is the part that almost everyone misquotes, misunderstands, and fails to carry to its necessary conclusion. The cogito does not say, my thoughts are true. It does not say, the content of my thinking is reliable. It says, there is an awareness here that is prior to the content of the thoughts. There is a witness. There is something that is not the thought, but that the thought is happening inside of. Descartes had not proven that his thoughts were trustworthy. He had proven that he was not identical to them. This is the discovery. The thinker and the thought are not the same thing. There is a you that exists prior to and independent of everything the voice has ever said. The voice has been speaking since before you had the language to question it. But you, the awareness behind the voice, the presence that Descartes found when he stripped everything else away, the witness that Vipassana practitioners spend years learning to locate, the diffused observer that Hayes's ACT patients discovered was still intact beneath decades of fused suffering. You have never been the voice. You have only been convinced that you were. And that conviction, not your circumstances, not your history, not the people who failed you, is the thing that has been shaping your life. The moment that distinction stops being an idea and becomes a lived experience, the moment you watch a thought arrive and know in your body that you are the one watching and not the thing being watched, the entire architecture of the voice's authority collapses. Not because the voice goes quiet. It will not. It was never supposed to. The survival organ keeps running. The mental formations keep arising. What changes is that you are no longer inside the broadcast. You are the one who can, for the first time, change the channel. Cognitive diffusion, the ACT term for what Descartes reached philosophically and what the Buddha described doctrinally, is not a technique you apply after the fact. It is a reorientation of where you are standing in relation to your own mind. Hayes's research showed that patients who developed diffusion skills did not stop having difficult thoughts, they stopped being governed by them. The thought, I am worthless, still arose, but it arose as an event in awareness, something the mind was doing, not something reality was declaring. And an event can be observed, it can be named, it can be allowed to pass. A declaration about the nature of you cannot. When you are fused,
There is no gap in which any of this is possible. When you are defused, the gap is everything. The practice, if you want to call it that, is simpler than you expect and harder than you want. When a thought arrives with authority, with the texture of fact, with the feeling of being simply honest about your situation, you pause. Not to argue with it, not to replace it with a better thought, which is just fusion with a more comfortable content, but to notice that it is a thought, to see it from the outside for a moment, to hold it at arm's length the way Descartes held his doubt, not eliminating it, not fighting it, but recognizing that there is a you that is doing the holding and a thing that is being held, and those are not the same entity. That recognition is not a cure, it is a correction, a return to a position you were always supposed to be standing in, but were never shown. The Buddha's name for that position was Sakshi, the witness, the unchanging awareness behind the changing content of experience. Descartes called it the res cogitans, the thinking thing, the irreducible presence that remained when everything else had been doubted away. Hayes called it the observing self, the self as context rather than the self as content. 3 different traditions, 3 different centuries, 3 different methods, 1 discovery. You are not the voice, you never were. You are the awareness the voice has been speaking into, mistaken for most of your life for the voice itself. You have been living inside a broadcast you never consented to. Now you know you can change the channel. If something in this video named something you have been carrying alone, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Not for the channel, for them.